So I work with a lot of runners and other athletes, and a lot of people inevitably ask me about protein. Are they getting enough protein? When should they eat protein? There are so many questions, and this is specifically for a plant-based diet because most people are worried about that on a plant-based diet. So I guess the main question is, how much protein do you actually need as an athlete on a plant-based diet?
That is a good question. And, when it comes to nutrient recommendations for athletes, we usually follow what the American College of Sports Medicine says or what the International Society of Sports Nutrition recommends. And both of them, and I'm talking about the latest recommendations they actually published, they say that, for protein, athletes need 1.2 to 2 gram per kg lean body mass per day. And the lean body mass is not the weight you see on the scale. It is actually less. So it is our body weight minus body fat. So, and I think that is where some of the problems start, because people usually go with what they see on the scale and calculate and say, oh my God, I need that much protein. So they tend actually to consume more, or aim to, actually their goal is to consume more. Now, we know actually from different studies that we are all consuming more protein than the recommended amount. And that goes both for non-vegans and vegans, but also for athletes. So I don't think people actually need to worry about the protein intake as long as they consume enough calories. And as you know, when we engage in physical activity, our caloric needs actually increase. So basically, we need more fuel, we need more energy. So which means that we need to eat more. And maybe you have heard that a lot of plant-based doctors and nutritionists like Dr. Greger, Dr. Barnard, they say that as long as you consume enough calories, you are getting enough protein. So what they are saying is that, as long as you are eating more calories, you're actually by default, increasing your protein intake. And if you're not eating enough calories, what happens is that the body will actually burn and use protein as fuel. And that's not a good source of energy because it takes longer to break down. So it actually slows down the athlete. So I think, people don't really need to worry about the protein intake. What they need to do is, the first step is actually making sure that they are consuming enough calories. And that is actually one of the main problems a lot of athletes face. They are not consuming enough calories.
When you say the body starts breaking down protein for energy, do you mean the protein that you eat or your muscle mass?
Well, it depends on what is happening. If there is a lot of people take protein powders, and what they don't realize is that protein shake, that extra protein, is not being used to actually build muscle. That is usually used as a fuel. But in extreme cases, when people are starving, yes, the body will start, breaking down body's kind of muscles to get that energy that the body needs. Because basically, the body wants to function first. The body is not really kind of focused on building muscle. That is not the main goal. So we are energy first kind of systems. We need the energy first. So, and I think that is what the focus should be, really, not the protein.
That's such a good point. So actually, when you're eating extra protein, your body isn't using that to build or repair your muscle. Your body is going to that for energy, because if you're not eating enough carbohydrate, then your body has to use the protein you're eating instead. So you mentioned that the amount of protein we eat per kilogram of body mass, of lean mass, but how do we figure out how much that is for us?
Well, there are some methods to, calculate it. Some fancy, measurements and tools actually to do it. To check your fat mass and then deduct it from your, body weight. But to be honest, again, when it comes to protein, I wouldn't really worry about it because we are consuming more. So even if you go actually by your actual body weight, your ideal, body weight, you would be getting enough on your diet. But if people are really interested to find out, how much exactly they need, there are some, calculations on internet. They can Google it and find it. Or as I said, there are some fancy tools, and some gyms actually provide those tools, where you actually pinch your skin, and you calculate how much of that is fat and deduct it. So it's really kind of a bit complicated, but it is possible to do it.
You said that if as long as you're eating a wholesome, varied diet, then you should be getting enough protein. As long as you're eating enough calories in that diet, you should be naturally getting enough protein. I mean, when if we're talking 10 years ago or more being vegan, then I would totally agree. Like you kind of had to be whole food plant based. But now you can definitely eat a lot of rubbish. Would you say that to everyone? I mean, I see your point of people are eating whole foods, but if you're not, I don't know.
You mean what? Even if you are eating junk food, would you get
Mm,
enough protein? Yes, and I think that is where the problem starts because especially athletes, they get away with a lot of actually bad dietary habits
mm,
because they need the calories, they need the energy first, right?
mhm,
So even if you are eating junk food, you are getting enough calories, so that your body is actually going to be able to run on that, and so your body is functioning. But you might not get enough nutrients, and especially phytonutrients. So
mm,
long term, yes, it will have some health implications, but not straight away. And I think that is actually, I don't know if you have read Rich Roll's, autobiography, and he says like when he was younger and he was doing all his running and swimming, and he was eating really a bad diet, but it wasn't really affecting him.
mm.
And I think again that is it. As an athlete, you get away with a lot of bad, food, but it doesn't mean that it is healthy. Because as I said, your body wants the energy first. That is
Mhm.
what your body is focused on. And if you are physically active, you need more calories. And as long as you give your body those calories, your body is not going to actually kind of complain straight away. Let's put it that way.
I think some people can get away more with eating junk food than others. You know, some people can have quite inflammatory symptoms from eating too much rubbish, whereas other people seem to get away with it much more. Um, so yeah, I guess some people can do that and other people can't. And it comes down to just listening to your own body and seeing what works for you and yeah, just working with that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for example, I have other health issues. So I know I don't get away with junk food. I
Mm,
mean, I could still kind of maybe train, but my training, the performance would really suffer, and
mhm,
I couldn't do really perform at my best. And also, even post training, obviously, exercise is an inflammatory kind of, causes inflammation. So if your diet, your baseline diet is not healthy, you actually suffer more from inflammation after exercise.
mhm.
So yes, you are right. Some people get away more than others. I agree.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I used to consume a lot of sunflower oil and rapeseed oil and things. That's what I always used to cook with. And I used to have such bad joint pain when I was running, like my knees. Oh my God. But when I've removed those and I replaced them with olive oil and less inflammatory oils, totally went away. But then again, I speak to other people who can consume rapeseed oil all the time and they never have any joint pain. So it is totally about listening to your body. So when you said that people don't have to worry about protein, do you mean this even for ultra runners and professional athletes? As long as they're eating enough energy, they shouldn't have to worry about their protein.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to downplay the role of protein. We do need protein. I mean, it is an essential nutrient. What I like to actually focus on is getting the carbohydrates first, and then
Mm,
protein is secondary. I mean, when you look especially at endurance athletes, they really need to have the carbohydrate so that they can actually optimize their glucose levels,
mm,
for an event. And then even throughout the event, while they're actually depleting their glycogen stores, they need to get that those carbohydrates in to actually replenish those glycogen
mm,
stores. And the same happens after an event. They need first to actually replenish those glycogen stores first and then think of the protein. Protein is necessary. It is an essential nutrient. It helps us to repair damaged muscle fibers. So we do need it. But even when you look at the ratio is protein to carbohydrates is 1 to 3 or 1 to 4. So you see that you need less protein. So I think I don't want to downplay the role of protein at all. We do need it, but it shouldn't be our main focus, if it makes sense.
Yes, I totally agree. That's one of the main misconceptions about protein and recovery is that people tend to have their protein shake or a high dose of protein directly after their exercise. And you're totally right. It's carbohydrate that you need to focus on in that part of the recovery window, but maybe
Exactly.
later on. So what is like the optimal time to have your main dose of protein?
Well, I would say post the workout, and it doesn't matter if it is a bodybuilding session, you have been doing some resistance training or endurance, training. It doesn't matter. You do need protein afterwards, and ideally in the first 2 hours, but up to 24 hours post workout is fine as well. So you do need the protein, but it shouldn't be your main nutrient. As I said, it should be carbs first, and that goes also for bodybuilders. It should be carbohydrates first and then protein secondary. And I usually recommend like kind of, a banana, for example, with a tablespoon of peanut butter. That would give you the carbohydrates and a bit of protein for the muscle repair. And obviously, depending on your body weight, how big you are, and how much you have trained, you need to more. And so you do need it post workout. And ideally, we know actually from research that for the muscle protein synthesis, it is better to have the protein throughout the day rather than one big meal of high protein. So a lot of people, when they come and say, oh, I'm looking for a high protein, I don't know, meal or snack idea, your body is just going to use like kind of a certain amount of it. It is not 0.3 gram per kg of body mass. So it is about, usually for most people, it's about 20 to 25 gram of protein, and you should have that every 3 to 5 hours, depending on your like kind of training activity or whatever you have been doing. So again, that's why protein shakes post workout are not a good idea. If anything, I would actually recommend a smoothie, because you can choose how much carbohydrates you want to put into that smoothie. You add I don't know, an apple, banana, whatever you like, a source of protein, peanut butter, hemp seed, flaxseed, again, whatever you like. And you can still add some greens like kale, spinach, and soya milk, is another good source of actually, protein. So I think, a smoothie is much cheaper and safer and healthier than a protein powders, and it would give you more of what you need, of what your body needs.
Would you ever recommend protein powders? I mean, never
It
say
is
never, but
no, I wouldn't say never, but let me just tell you, I was just reading actually a fitness book, and the fitness book had a chapter on sports nutrition, and I was surprised that even a fitness book, and it is a non-vegan fitness book, started by saying that we can all get the protein we need from foods, and there is no need for protein powders. But then it was saying, yes, but you may want to consider it in some circumstances. I mean, and I have spoken to many different sports dietitians and nutritionists, and they all say the same thing. We can get enough protein from food. There is no reason to actually have protein powders. The only time I would actually recommend protein shakes is like kind of people who are sick, who cannot actually eat real food. Elderly people who have higher protein requirements, but they find it really hard to, just swallow, for example. Or sometimes, but again, not really necessarily, but they can have it if they want to, is professional bodybuilders just before a competition, because they are actually trying to cut down on their calories, so losing fat while maintaining their muscle mass. That is the only time that they could use it just for convenience, really. And I think that is it actually why people do it. Firstly, because we have always done it. So it is, it is the first thing actually people ask when they start training. What protein powders do I need? Whereas the correct question should be, what exercises do I need to actually do in order to, I don't know, get faster, get bigger or whatever. It's not, the protein doesn't make you any faster or bigger. And one of the sports dietitians I have learned a lot from is Dan Bernardo, and he's not vegan, but he's very experienced, and he has worked with a few U.S. Olympic teams. He was actually working in 2004, 2010, and I think even in 2014 Olympics. And his teams, the U.S. teams, actually won Olympic medals. So he's really experienced in what he's doing. And he says it is easier, cheaper, and safer to eat, real food. And that is what I recommend. And I think, again, when you eat real foods, you're also getting all those micronutrients which your body needs. And protein powders are processed. And we were talking about processed foods that, some people get away with it, some people don't. And I know people who actually have side effects, when they take protein powders. They kind of force themselves because they feel like everybody else has been doing that. But I think, protein isolate can actually create intolerances. And as I said, I always tell people, don't waste your money on protein powders. Instead, invest it on a good personal trainer who can give you the right exercises. That is going to make more of an impact on your training than the protein powder.
I think potentially a personal trainer is slightly more expensive than the protein powder, but I see your point.
Well, you don't need to have a personal trainer every week, but if you get one good training program, that is going to really make a bigger impact. And protein powders, the amount people take, it can get quite expensive. Actually, one of my clients, I remember when I told him he doesn't need to actually have protein powders, he was happy, but then he said, oh my God, my wife is going to be so mad because I have been spending so much money on protein powders. So I think, it is just, people just do it because everybody else is doing. And you're afraid that if you don't do it, you're not going to see the same training benefits. And it is not true.
It's so hard to cut through what are marketing messages and what's really good advice. And even when you try and look at the science, it's difficult to figure out actually what the right thing to do is. So I'm very glad to have you with us to tell us. So, what are the symptoms of having too much protein? And I guess this might be more of an issue on an animal food based diet than a plant based diet.
Yes, you are right. And also because the most studies have been done on actually looking at animal proteins rather than, kind of plant proteins. So we don't really have any studies looking to see what happens if you have too much plant protein. We don't have that. But, with animal proteins, it is the same problems you see, the same health issues you see with consumption of animal products. Heart disease, kidney problems, and calcium deficiency. So all of these problems you get, with any animal-based diet, to be honest. It would be interesting to see actually a study which looks only at plant protein and what happens if we have too much, because there is a trend of some people saying, okay, you should have high protein, diet, even if it is plant-based. And I don't know. It would be really interesting to see that.
Yeah, that would be quite interesting. Do we have studies that compare plant-based protein to animal-based protein in athletes, like the effects or the differences?
Oh yes, I mean my favorite study was published last year, beginning of 2021, and it was a very good study because what they did is they took 19 male vegans who had been vegan for more than 4 years and 19 omnivore, males, and they were, their strength, fitness level, everything was the same. And they were put through a kind of 12-week program, training and diet. And the diet, what they did is like they wanted to make sure that they are all getting the same amount of protein, which was 1.6 gram per kg per day. So they, if necessary, they topped it up with protein powders just to make sure that they are all having the same protein powders. And they had this training, a 12-week program, and they focus only on leg muscles. And after the 12 weeks, they again measured the strength, muscle size, everything. And it was the same, increase in muscle strength and muscle size. Really identical. And it was actually the research group was a non-vegan group. And the lead researcher, he said actually now, after this study, he's actually looking to eat more plant protein. So I think, it really showed us that you can absolutely gain enough muscle on a plant protein kind of diet. And I mean, we have so many vegan bodybuilders. So we know that it is possible. But yes, we have not this study to back it up. And I hope that people realize that actually there are so many health benefits to having actually a plant-based diet, not just for an athlete. I mean, for an athlete, obviously you want to have a diet which helps your overall health. Because if you are not healthy to begin with, your performance is going to suffer. So the diet which is good for your overall health is also going to be good for your performance.
Yes, of course. And like you said, making sure that you're getting all of those phytonutrients and anti-inflammatory molecules as well is super important, because if you don't recover properly, then you can't perform well. So, of course, all of this is very important. And I'm very glad that we have these studies now, because we have so much research on whey protein. And I think that's why there are so many recommendations for whey protein and why it's been pushed
Mm-hmm.
as better than any other sort of protein for muscle repair and building. But I guess we're starting to balance out that research now.
Yes. Yes.
So what are your top foods to recommend specifically to runners and endurance athletes?
Well, as I said, endurance athletes need to focus more on carbohydrates, and I like actually to focus more on whole food, plant based, rather than like kind of any processed foods. So my recommendation is always, depending on how long your workout is going to be, how long your run is going to be, keep it simple. Even a banana before your run is going to give you some energy,
Mm-hmm.
and dried fruits with nuts if you like it, and oatmeal. Actually, my favorite meal is probably oatmeal, because you get enough carbohydrates. If you want some protein, you can also add just peanut butter to it, or hemp seed, chia seeds. So it is actually a very good meal to have pre-workout and post-workout. So you can choose. It's very good. I love oatmeal or smoothies. Smoothies are more for post-workout, because a lot of athletes actually cannot tolerate to eat something, after they had been training. So drinking is much easier. So instead of a protein shake, make your own smoothie, and then you can choose what you want to add to. So I think, as I said, carbohydrates should be your main focus. But then, yes, post workout, you want to add some sort of protein to your snack or meal.
Mm-hmm. And a bit off topic now, but what are your thoughts on training fasted? Because there are a lot of different opinions out there and lots of different advice. So what are your thoughts?
I actually work out quite fast in a fasted state quite a lot. And just because I like to work out in the morning, but I don't want to eat. So it is possible. And I know a few athletes who do intermittent fasting. And I know they actually work out before they start eating, during the day. So it is possible. And really, again, it is about, your glycogen stores. So
Mm.
if you have been eating quite enough food the day before, you know, your glycogen stores are full, you have enough energy to burn, throughout your workout. So it is possible. But again, I would look, I would give individualized advice,
Mm-hmm.
because some people, they cannot tolerate it. Some people actually, especially women, and I think it's just because in general, maybe they are always dieting or watching what calories they eat, they tend to become dizzy if they
Mm-hmm.
do that. And I think it's just because, their blood glucose levels drop, and they just like, feel a bit of dizziness and headache, and, lightheaded. So yes, but it is possible.
You talked about making sure that you're eating enough the day before so that you still have some glycogen stores when you're training in the morning. But some of the benefits I've read that come from fasted training are from when your glycogen stores are empty, because then your body is forced to burn your fat stores, and that gives your body some flexibility when you're doing longer events and things
Mhm.
like that. So
So it is the both of it, because yes, you will burn fat, but it depends on what your aim is. Are you just working out? You do need a bit of energy,
mm,
or is it an event where you are going to compete?
mm-hmm,
I would never recommend actually competing on an empty stomach, because I think you really need to have fuel, especially if it is going to be a longer event. And you would probably need to think of what to eat during the event as well. So I think yes. So I think it is finding the right balance, because again, I have seen a lot of people feel lightheaded.
mm-hmm,
So especially women, I have worked with a lot of women. Especially when I was PT, actually, when I was working as a personal trainer myself, I would see a lot of women. When they were doing it fasted, they would get lightheaded. So I think it's about your overall diet and what you have been eating the day before. And
yes,
in general, your overall diet, not just the day before, because as you know, again, our diet, the athletes, 55 to 65% should be actually carbohydrates,
mm-hmm.
every day. So it's not just about, what you do before an event.
Yeah, I really like how you keep mentioning making sure the advice is personalized, because obviously everybody's bodies work differently, and it's always important just to see how your body reacts to a certain intervention and then just tweak it accordingly.
Yeah.
So, um, okay, give us an inspiring story about someone you know or you've worked with, or maybe even yourself, regarding
Uh,
diet and performance.
well, I used to be junk food vegan. Really, I mean, when I went vegan, I did it for animals, and I didn't know anything about nutrition. So I was eating a lot of junk food. So I didn't really see any of those benefits people talk about when they go vegan. But when I switched to a whole food plant-based diet, and I did it mainly for health reasons, so because I was suffering, from really bad migraines. At the same time, I saw benefits in my training. First of all, obviously, not having the migraines meant that I was free actually to train. So that was good. But also, I noticed when I was running that I could breathe better. Really, it was like kind of, oh, that's so much easier. I can actually, how when you're running after a while, you feel like breathless. I wasn't feeling like that. And we know that, plant-based diets, they actually increase your VO2 max. So I that was really something I saw. And another thing I saw was like, again, just before transitioning to a whole food plant-based diet, I had a rotator cuff injury. So I had lost strength in my right arm. I couldn't even lift my arm. So it was really bad. And I was just doing rehab exercises. It was going very slowly. But as soon as I switched to a whole food plant-based diet, which is like really full of antioxidants, anti-inflammatory compounds, I couldn't do any push-ups. I hadn't done any push-ups, for the for 6 months before, I transitioned. And then as soon as I changed my diet, after a week, I could do 5 push-ups. It was almost like the inflammation had gone down so much that I was able actually to go back to, start training properly. So for me, that was really amazing. And I always tell people that, if you are actually serious about your sport, whatever sport you are doing, you should go, plant-based, because it is going to give you that advantage. And I also saw the same, with one of my clients. He was very active, was doing triathlons, but then he got sick. And like all of us, when we have an injury or when we are sick, we don't train, and he lost his fitness level. And then when he came to me, it wasn't really related to his exercise. He wanted just to get better in himself. But then obviously, when he went plant-based, he actually felt better, and he started training. And he started actually going to gym again. And he was so happy because, again, he thought that is it. He was a young man, and he was like kind of, he was so depressed, feeling like, that was it. He couldn't, do all those things he enjoyed doing before. But when he went plant-based and felt better in himself, he went back to training, went to the gym. And it was really interesting because he didn't want to go vegan, but he wanted to eat a healthier diet. But what I actually witnessed with him was that the healthier he ate, the more plant-based he was eating, the better he was actually doing at the gym. So I think, again, it shows that, the benefits of a whole food plant-based diet, basically.
Yeah, that's so cool. And we have so much evidence for this now, that there is, and so many stories that this is the best diet for athletes. So yeah.
Yes, there is a lot of anecdotal evidence. And I just think, just because there isn't sometimes research on it, doesn't mean that we shouldn't start doing it. The movie Game Changers, obviously, it showed us all these amazing athletes and what they are doing on a plant-based diet.
What, if you had to give one piece of advice to our listeners today who will mainly be runners, what would you give them? What would you tell them to do?
Carbohydrates.
What's one
Focus
change?
on
Okay.
carbohydrates. Just have more carbohydrates in your diet. Honestly, I think that is unrefined carbohydrates. Make sure that you are getting your quinoa, brown rice, or I don't know, spelt pasta. There are so many different ways of getting your carbohydrates in the way you like it. And sometimes just having a banana before your run or post run is going to make a huge difference in your total kind of fitness level, because it is really, for runners, it is really about the glycogen stores. You want to make sure that your blood glucose levels are as optimized as possible. And I mean, you have heard about carbohydrate loading, but we are now finding out that actually you don't need to really do the carb loading. All you need to do is just make sure that every day the bulk of your energy is coming from carbohydrates. So just have more carbohydrates, but unrefined carbohydrates.
So no carb loading means I can't just eat loads of bread and pizza the day before my race.
You can, but it's not going to make a huge difference if you have been starving yourself and not eating enough carbohydrate in general. Does that make sense? I mean, there are actually some nutritionists, sports nutritionists, who don't recommend carb loading at all. And we used to do like kind of depleting glycogen stores by not eating and training a lot. So we have now found that was actually harmful. So we are now recommending just to have more carbohydrates, a couple of days before your main event. But even that, a lot of people say, if your diet, the bulk of your diet is carbohydrates, then you shouldn't be needing to do carb loading. So I think the main a piece of advice I would leave people with is like kind of have more carbohydrates in your diet.
Just throughout all the time. Yeah, was it train low, compete high? That was the motto for a number of years, wasn't it? So
Yes,
now
yes.
we're not recommended to do that.
No,
And
not at all.
okay, good. Okay. What tell us more about what you do, who you work with, and where people can find you.
Well, I'm active on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm actually really happy to say that I have just created the first ever course on plant-based sports nutrition. I created that for Plant-Based Health Professionals UK and veganfitness.com. I don't know how familiar you are with veganfitness.com. Nimai Delgado, you know him?
Mm-mm.
So yeah, he's a bodybuilder. So I created this sports nutrition course, which is going to be online, and I did it with 7 other registered dietitians and nutritionists, and we are going to launch it in April. And we made sure to cover all aspects of sports nutrition for plant-based athletes. All these common questions, uh, are keto diets actually good for athletes, or can you build muscle on a plant-based diet? So we covered everything: energy gels, what you should eat, and where do you get your protein from? Do you need to have more protein than not, because you are vegan? So things like that. We covered everything. So yes, that is going to be launched in April. So that's quite exciting. But otherwise, as I said, I'm the education lead and nutritionist for Plant-Based Health Professionals UK, and people can find me on Facebook and Instagram.
Amazing. What's your Instagram handle?
Oh, it is. People don't get it usually right. It's plant-powered chi. Chi, because I do kung fu, so it is the egg. Chi is the kind of the source of energy. So it is plant-powered chi nutrition.
Cool. Thank you. We'll put that in the show notes as well. Leila, thank you so
Thank you.
much for joining me. It's been great to speak to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.